Hi, my name's Sheehan, and today I'd like to talk about this book, Chocky, by John Wyndham. I believe this was his last novel, published in 1968, and I was intrigued by this novel because I remember as a child in the mid 80s seeing the TV adaptation of this novel, which greatly kind of fascinated me and also slightly scared me, as I remember. And I saw this book at a friend's house recently, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to read the novel and see if it compares to the TV adaptation. Not that I can remember much of that anyway, as being quite young at the time. But Chocky is really, if you could sum it up in a sentence, is the possession of one want of a better word, of a young boy by a benign alien force. The story begins with David. David is the boy's father. He's like the narrator of the story. And he's noticed that his son, or David and his wife, have noticed that their son, Matthew, has started talking to an imaginary friend. And they begin to think, bit of a childhood phase. Their daughter did a similar thing as well. So they think, oh, Matthew's doing it now. But then Matthew starts asking these rather intriguing questions about science, how machines work, why the day is ordered in 24 hours, why not another number? And his parents begin to become a bit, they begin to get a little alarmed by this imaginary friend, which Matthew calls Chocky. And Chocky seems to have some influence over Matthew, and Matthew seems to be talking to Chocky a lot. And then the teachers begin to notice Matthew's new interest in more obscure forms of mathematics and difficult scientific concepts, certainly for a 10-year-old boy. So Matthew's parents begin to worry a bit about him, and they have a friend who is a psychologist, and they take him to him, and he kind of suggests that Matthew is possessed in a way, which of course the parents don't like to hear. But anyway, Matthew then starts painting these amazing pictures, which are quite extraordinary for a boy of his age. And his art teacher enters him for a competition. And then just after this is happening, Matthew and his sister Polly, whilst under the charge of family friends on holiday, they fall into a river and are swept away, and the worst is feared. But it turns out that Matthew miraculously has learned how to swim in this terrible situation and saves his sister. And he becomes something of a local celebrity. And then with his artwork as well, making a splash, he kind of becomes a national celebrity, and Matthew and his family fall prey to a media circus. Eventually, Chocky leaves Matthew, and Matthew's quite upset by this. Although Matthew seems to find Chocky's presence stressful and rather burdensome, he actually becomes very attached to Chocky. They are friends. He sees him as a friend. Or sees her as a friend, actually, because Chocky's gender isn't ever ascertained. I suppose there's some contemporary relevance there. And actually, Chocky's often referred to as her rather than him. And so Chocky leaves Matthew, and then Matthew's kidnapped because people begin to think, who is this child who has these... who can suddenly swim and creates these amazing artworks, and who is this Chocky he talks about? What if there's some truth in this, and Matthew's suddenly seen as potentially, a valuable asset to the government, etc., for his potential knowledge from, you know, from outside Earth or whatever. Chocky then returns near the end of the book, really to say goodbye to Matthew. Chocky, as revealed to Matthew's dad, David, begins to talk to Chocky himself. He finally believes Matthew and manages to talk to Chocky through Matthew. And it turns out that Chocky is an alien on a mission to find suitable, to kind of help other civilizations, I suppose, to make the most of their technology and what they have. And Chocky's very critical of our over-reliance on fossil fuels and that kind of thing, which I guess is quite ahead of its time. This was written in 1968 or published in 1968, and of course that resonates very strongly today, doesn't it? And then Chocky goes because he knows that he's likely to cause more trouble and anguish for Matthew. So although Chocky himself has become, or herself has become, attached to Matthew, she decides to leave him for Matthew's own good. But then right at the end of the book, as Matthew's rather despondent about Chocky going, his dad gives him a rather wonderful present, which if you haven't read the book, I won't spoil it for you, although I've probably spoiled a lot of it for you already. So Chocky, yeah, it's definitely worth a read. It's quite a short book. Although I have to say there's a lot of padding in this book, even for a short book. There's a lot of David, Matthew's father, talking to his psychologist friend, and it's all rather posh, and he meets him in a club, and you get a sense that this would have been quite old-fashioned even for 1968, But, there's a certain charm to this novel as well, and it's got a rather moving ending. And it's an interesting concept, a child being possessed by an alien force. And, there's some interesting themes to do with friendship, childhood imagination, the questions children ask, the nature of how parents relate to their children. It's well worth a read with some interesting themes. Please watch to the end of the video. I'll put on a brief PowerPoint slide about the themes and structure of this novel as I see them as well. And thank you for watching. Goodbye.